I jumped in, man, right next to the fire, right in the flames. And like,
Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the Skid Steer Nation podcast. Today, our guest is Tyler Hanssen from Rupert, Idaho, and he owns a construction company called Hanssen Cattle and Construction. Tyler, how are you doing today?
good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. For anyone watching, he's actually working today, so he took some time while he's driving, so his video might be a little darker, a little movie, but still appreciate him taking some time out of his day to talk with us. So, I think it's fair to start this conversation and just kind of be transparent. We met, a little over a year ago, about a year this month, actually, right?
Yeah, pretty close to that, something like that.
Yeah. So Skid Steer Nation was doing some marketing for small local contractors, doing local website builds, SEOs, all that stuff. And you saw that post and was intrigued by that. And we jumped on a phone call. I think we talked for 2 hours that first day.
Yeah, probably something to that effect. Seems like we talk, it's usually for that amount of time at least.
But what we kind of determined that day was that you were slightly farther ahead than most of the people that we had built that program for. You already had an established customer base with the dairy farms, building feedlots. So attracting new business wasn't your focus. Your issue really was taking a small business and creating an actual business out of it.
Right.
So
Yeah, that was kind of my main.
About a year ago, Tyler, when we first met, you had how many guys on your crew? What were some of the issues that you were having? And what roadblocks did you have facing you to get to where you wanted to be?
Well, about a year ago, we were kind of fluctuating between 3 to 6 guys. And then I had a sub crew that we worked with on almost everything at that point in time. So between all of us, there was 10 of us, kind of up and down right there real close. But the main things that, main potential issues that I was facing that I was wanting to get ahead of was I had opportunities on the horizon for this year, for 2022, that we just weren't ready for, man. And I knew we weren't ready for it. And I wanted to be ahead of the curve. I think one of the analogies I used with you is because right when we first started getting snowstorms here was like a kind of where you sell implements. I was like, man, I'm trying to buy a plow attachment before I need one.
Right.
And so that was kind of where we were at the time. I wasn't necessarily where I was at the time wasn't necessarily bad. It just wasn't good enough for where we were going.
So Tyler, let's backtrack a little bit here. Where were you at? Like, when did you start your business? How did you get started? And like, you owned cattle and raised cattle, and you got into construction after that. Give us a little backstory on how you got into business.
So, kind of got into business. Well, that's a little bit longer story. I've kind of always been in business since I was a young kid, doing some type of side hustle. But Hanssen Cattle kind of started 2014, 2015, just running cattle. I started building some fence kind of here and there, part-time for some residual income. I just needed to make a little extra money because the cattle were struggling. And I knew how. I worked for a fence contractor through college and out of college for a little bit. And so I started working, building some stuff for the neighbors here and there. And then word kind of caught on. And then I kind of needed some help. And I needed some help on the farm here and there. So I called my wrestling coach from high school, and he sent me a couple of high school kids that quote unquote needed to work. I put them to work and kind of on the farm and building fence. And fast forward from 2016 to 2022, one of those kids is still with me. And we just kind of every year, I call it graduating, just kind of graduated its scopes of work. We've learned how to do more than just build fence, and kind of turned into more of a turnkey general contractor for your for your feedlot or your dairy, anything that you need on your farm or ranch,
Yeah. So really, like, is it fair to say that you had no ambition of starting a construction company, just kind of matured out of your little side hustle?
Yeah, actually, I always liked doing it. I always wanted to kind of do it here and there, but I never, in 2016, 2017, it was not my intent to have the crew and the company that I have now.
What did you want to do back there? Did you just want to keep growing your cattle business?
Yeah, I just wanted to ranch, man. I just
Okay.
wanted to ranch and I wanted to, I have a little feedlot and I wanted to expand that. I wanted to end up purchasing a larger feedlot. Just, I love feeding cattle is a huge passion of mine. Um, it's just, it's kind of a tough business barrier. There is barriers of entry out here in Idaho, at least in that world. And it's just a tough business to make it in. And now I'm building the feedlots now instead of running them, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
you got it. It does. So when in that process did you kind of have that moment of like, oh man, this isn't just a side hustle anymore, and it's not supplemental income. This is going to become what I do.
Uh,
I'm gonna be a
I would say would have been the spring of 2019.
So you had
Uh,
3 years where you kind of treated it like a side hustle, and your focus was still cattle then.
100%.
Okay.
Uh, 2019 in that spring, I almost lost everything in the cat. I made a couple of bad market calls on my cattle, and I custom fed a couple bad sets of calves, and it all combined. And I was on very, very thin ice. And the fastest way that I knew how to make money was to go get a big project and get that project done to bail myself out. So that's what I did.
What was that first project?
It was a processing facility for a feedlot here west of me, about 45 minutes. And it's fairly intricate. We actually, it took me quite a while to get it all put together, the design work and stuff like that. It wasn't necessarily out of our scope of work. We've built some like it before, but it was, you know, considerably bigger than anything we'd done before. And like, it needed concrete done, and I couldn't get a concrete contractor. And I show up to work one day with a bunch of concrete tools, and my guys are like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we got mud coming tomorrow, boys. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we're pouring the pads now. I'm like, well, we don't know how. I said, I know we don't know how, but we don't have a choice.
But we got to get it done. I love that, man. I think that's so great. You hear that with so many guys that you just have to overcome.
Yes.
Life's going to throw you curveballs all the time. And you can sit on the couch and complain about it, or you can like jump in the game and figure it out as you go.
Right, 100%. And that's kind of literally my company's testament to that mentality is, what we don't know, we'll learn, but just, I don't know. We call it charging hell with a bucket of water, man.
Charging hell with a bucket of water.
Just what we do. It's our culture, man. And none of us are daunted by it.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you called your wrestling coach when you originally wanted the kids to come work for you and like you needed some help. Do you still rely on that as a source for employees, or like?
To a degree, I don't have any wrestlers this year, which is the first time in a while. I do have one of the guys who's involved in the wrestling program is now the welding instructor at my high school where I learned how to weld, and I'm pretty close with him. So now he is one of the coaches, but he's not my coach, quote unquote. But I kind of rely on him now. Like, hey, I actually have 3 kids out of that welding shop right now, and I just kind of ended up with him, I guess. And he kind of has the kids, if he sees one with potential or one that he thinks will want to come work out in the field, because there's a big difference between a shop welder and a field welder.
Right.
And if he has one of those kids that's interested, he'll have him call me. He has my number.
Yep. And you said something to me like off interview a little bit ago, and I kind of made note of it and thought it was kind of neat, and I want to talk to you about it. But your young kids that you bring in, whether they're in high school or right out of high school and all that, you've kind of grouped them all together and gave them a name, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of depends. We call them the young guns or the hooligans. But yeah, like it's not uncommon. We just got done building a large feedlot in Malta, Idaho, and it's not uncommon on Friday to see a 8-man high school kid crew with one supervisor just hanging rails like crazy, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, we call them the young guns or the hooligans, kind of depending on the day.
I love that because like when you bring in new employees, especially younger employees and all that, they're so nervous about fitting in and they're kind of like ashamed or embarrassed a little bit that they don't know all the information and how to do the work that you guys know.
Mhm.
And like when you group them all together and you kind of built a little pod called the Young Guns, like now they had a community within the company that they could kind of rely on and attach their identity to, and they kind of get rid of that. Have you noticed that? Like they're not as timid or as nervous because there's another guy right down the street that's part of the same crew, and they
Yeah, yeah, and I think I do agree. I think it's a culture thing, and then I mean, just in general, we're young. I mean, I'm 32 years old. So I mean, I only have one employee that's older than me. Everybody else is, in their mid 20s to early 30s, and so in general, we are young guns, essentially,
yeah,
and it is part of our identity right now. But it's kind of fun because you get somebody, that's like 23, 24, kind of right on the cusp of being foreman material, but they're still just a little bit unsure. Well, you give them a to-do list and a crew of quote unquote hooligans, and it's amazing how fast they learn what you kind of they learn what you're looking for almost organically because they're in that leadership position.
yeah.
And it's really fun, to be honest with you, to watch guys take hold of that and go.
Absolutely. And, I think there's something else about that too. You talked about how you pair up the younger guys with some of the older guys, and you look at the older guys and say, hey, whatever skills you need them to have, you have to teach them. And you got you need a little bit of pushback at the beginning on that. And now you're getting some company buy-in on that process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's one of those deals like, hey man, do you want to run the shovel forever or do you want to delegate this off at some point, and most people, they just get too busy in their tasks. They don't think about these things like, hey, that's the most efficient use of our time. We got a 17-year-old kid here. It's pretty tough. Let's teach him how, you can run the shovel too, but like, let's teach him how as well.
Yeah.
And it doesn't turn into, oh, these kids don't know how to do anything. It's like, well, they don't know how to do anything because you haven't taught them anything.
Have you noticed that the work of the older guys in your crew that have been with you for a little longer has improved by them teaching? Like, have they taught themselves more efficient ways to do the job because they're teaching younger, newer people how to do the job?
Absolutely. The old adage, sometimes the best way to learn is to teach. And it's amazing. Even I don't have everything figured out. Don't get me wrong. And I think I see it within myself that like some of the things that we do now, like as accountants, some of the projects we built, I really didn't know how to do them. So I'm trying to teach my guys something I really don't know how to do 100% myself. And it's but construction's construction. Level is level, plumb is plumb, and sticking to the basics is a big thing for us. And so yeah, to answer your question,
So, and then I think playing off of that, have you got some like local contractors or local ranchers or local somebody that you rely on in times of need, like almost like a mentor or like a construction coach for projects that you're not sure how to do and you might need a little advice on it, or do you just gun through it and figure it out on your own?
but kind of, I would say I'm probably 70% figured out. I don't have a very strong network of people that do what I do here. I do have a few people that do know how to do some things. As far as the X's and O's of construction that have taught me some things, have helped me. One of my foremen that he's came on this last year, company he worked for a long time, retired, and he's experienced. He's 37 and he's been in this industry for a long time. And so between me and him, we can figure a lot of things out, but he does have certain experiences that I don't have and vice versa. So I'd say he's a big source for me as far as, hey man, I don't know how to do this project. Have you ever done one like this? He's like, well, I've never actually done one either, but I know a guy and I watched this happen once and I think that worked for him. And then we kind of try things and put our heads together.
Yeah.
But as far as like a true blue mentor around here, I don't really have one, man. I have some guys that I can pick their brain about business a little bit, and culture and mentality, but I don't really have a mentor.
Gotcha. So something that I really piqued me that I thought would be good and interest to talk about today was like when we first met a year ago, how big was your company? Like how many employees did you have working for you?
Um, We fluctuate between like 4 and 6.
And where are you at today?
Um, I don't honestly, right off the top of my head, because I have a handful of part-time guys that are kind of in and out. So including part-time guys, we're probably 12, 13 guys right now.
So you've almost doubled or tripled your workforce in 12 months.
Yeah.
For your company. And we talked about it a year ago that you were going to have a lot of growing pains by expanding your crew so quickly. What kind of advice do you have if someone's on the precipice of growing their business to the next level? Of like, what areas did you focus on to make sure that you were prepared to minimize the issues of rapid growth?
So it goes back, and you helped me a lot with these things. I think the biggest thing for streamlining multiple people to basically everybody be on the same page is they got to know where the book is, right? They've got to know it can't all be tribal knowledge here. And we got to make this stuff common knowledge. And some of that comes in formalities that, some people are like, oh, it's formal and it's textbook and all this kind of stuff. But like having something that's tangible for these guys, some type of support has been really big. We've got like job books now. Anytime we have a new job, I have a book and it's got pictures, it's got measurements, it's got some support. It has some areas for filling the blanks. Like, hey, here's some unknowns. Here's some things to keep an eye on. Here's input. You know what I mean? And all of my job leads get one of these books, but everybody gets to look at the books too.
Yeah.
That's not like some secret that only the foreman can look at. New guy can look at. I want the new guy to look at it.
So we talked about this a lot over the last year, but like I firmly believe that most disgruntled employees, that is caused because a lack of communication and an unknowing of what needs to be done. Like people don't like going up to work today and be like, well, I have no idea what we're doing today. But it just puts them in a bad mood, and then you're going to have a troubled employee throughout that whole project or throughout that day. Did you see a difference with your staff, like your crew? Were they more engaged and were they more willing to take the lead or work on things without you telling them to do it because of your engagement with them during and before the project?
Absolutely. It just goes back to, you think about yourself as an employee, you put yourself in those shoes. I don't like being in the dark as much as anybody, and just the more people know, the more power they have. I think that's the biggest thing that my biggest piece of advice would be empower your people. Delegate, make sure that, they clearly know what you expect of them, what you want out of them, so on and so forth. And then give them the tools to do that, and don't be the bottleneck within your own business. It's I was bottleneck at one point in time where I was going to be. And I've learning how to not be the bottleneck is important, I think.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, there's so many owners that, and myself included, there was phases in my career where I'll do it. I want it done this way. I'll just do it instead of taking the time to empower and train, or understanding that, hey, just because I walk to the left and he wants to walk to the right doesn't mean we're both not going to meet at the end point. Like, how important is how the work gets done versus getting the work done. And I was the bottleneck in my own business numerous times. I was just too young or too naive or not intelligent enough to recognize it. And I think a lot of guys go through that same problem where they got an expectation of the work they want to have completed, but they don't know how to verbalize, communicate, or plan with team members. And it's not an overnight process, is it?
No, I'm still far from perfect. I'd say I'm probably only 30 or 40% there, but I'm getting better.
Yeah.
I'm better.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, talking about that a little bit more, like one of the issues that you ran into, like we talked about, was the tribal knowledge, and a lot of your job leads and yourself knew how to do everything, and everyone else like needed mentoring or coaching throughout every project. And we notified that as a possible issue, because if one of your job leads left, you were going to be up the old shit creek without a paddle.
Right.
And we looked at building like some systems and processes, and we're not talking about huge databases or, complex computer things. We're talking about basic things. Hey, what's the checklist every morning that needs to be done on the trucks, the equipment, the job site? Are we having a powwow after the end of the day to confirm we're on track and on schedule? We just started working on small, easy, bite-sized projects to just have your team like start shaking their head going, hey, I like the direction we're going. Walk me through a little bit of some of the things you implemented a year ago that have allowed you to get to where you are today.
Um, Morning meetings that I actually put some forethought. I had some substance beforehand instead of just having a morning meeting. Hey guys, yeah, we're working today. I think we're gonna try to build this. I actually kind of come to the morning meetings with like, hey, this is the plan. And then I get some input or I get some buy-in, like, hey, you know, breaking guys off into tasks and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, I'll grab one of my project leads beforehand. We'll kind of have a pre-meeting to be on the same page, and we'll have a meeting, and then go through the checklist. Like, all right, cool. You're gonna go with this guy. You're gonna go with this guy. You're gonna go with this guy. You two, before anything, you need to go start the skid steers and check all the fluids, so on and so forth, and none of it's rocket science. Like you're saying, it's not like this huge database thing. It's just more getting everybody on the same team. You think about like a football game, it's not like everybody just like shows up by themselves right as the game starts, walking in from all over the place. They all start in the locker room together. They all have an idea of what's going to go on, and then they go out in the field and they execute it.
I really think it boils down to like, we as business owners, we're always thinking about what needs to be done tomorrow, end of the week, next week. But we do a really bad job planning that out and preparing it and communicating it to anyone on the team. Mm-hmm. And then we get frustrated that they don't understand what we want to have accomplished, but we don't look at ourselves and go, well, he doesn't understand it because I didn't explain it.
Right.
And
a friend and I had this conversation one day. It's like, man, it's really easy to be like, feel let down or feel like, you're not getting the buy-in that you want when you present something to them. It's like brand new. You're like, man, how is this confusing to you? It's like, well, it literally just hit his plate just now, and you've been thinking on it for 2 weeks. Yeah, you have a dissect. He does not.
Right.
And, and give him 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. But if you, again, going to him with some type of structure, some substance, that lag time in between right there, people get hooked in faster.
Yeah.
And I experienced less of the confusion of what we're doing because it's new and foreign because there's some substance.
And by having these meetings and going over the plan, whether it be for the day, the week, or the whole project, and allowing your team to like ask questions, have feedback, question the process. Mm-hmm. With that, are you finding that when you get ready to start that project or get to work that day, like everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, for sure.
And have you noticed an increase in throughput with work for the day because of that?
Yeah, because everybody, for the most part, more than one person understands the next step at that point. So, they understand what we want to get done for the day or what we want to get done for the week. Some of the stuff that we do is timeline based because scheduling concrete and getting concrete out here right now is hard. Mm-hmm. So it's like, hey guys, I kind of have to try to have a crystal ball. Like, hey, I've got concrete scheduled for next Wednesday. I don't know if we're gonna be ready for it, but we better be. Right. And so then they understand, oh crap, we gotta be ready for this pour. And so then it kind of helps everybody prioritize. There's certain parts of this project. Yes, it needs done, but does that need done before Wednesday?
Right.
And it kind of helps, and we do that together a lot of the times. Most of the time I'll have my ideas for prioritization, but it also, I bring my main guys in on that too, because I want their input. Like, hey, and then I'm big on that. I like the inclusion side of it because really, ideally, my case in point today, I'm not going to get to the job site my guys are on today until probably 10:30 or 11.
Are you worried about that at all?
No, not even a little bit.
Yeah. So are you still running those meetings, or have you empowered your team leads to kind of take control and plan their days with their teams?
It kind of depends because every project is different. Like last week, we're actually at 3 different job sites. So I didn't run any of it. I wasn't there for any of the meetings other than the initial meetings. Mm-hmm. But like, it just kind of depends. But I'm actually trying not to run the meeting. Sometimes I'll run like the first one, like the first get to a project. Hey, boys, this is what we're doing. Goals, intent, so on and so forth. But on the daily anymore, on the task breaking off, no, I don't do it at all.
How hard was that for you to give up?
Um, it was really hard by the first 3 or 4 times. But once I felt comfortable in getting the buyback from the guys that I was delegating that to, and I knew they were hooked in like I was, and that just comes from private conversation, right?
Yeah.
Private conversation, just following up, and I just ask questions, like make sure that they understand what's expected out of them, and they've gained a level of trust. I know exactly what's going to be said at the meeting tomorrow morning, or relatively close, and it's not hard anymore.
Yeah. And again, I think a testament to you committed to training your leads and the rest of your team, and you put together some sort of an idea or a process. It might be different than the guy down the street, but it's yours, and you stuck to it. Like even on days when things were a little tough, like you had to bite your lip, you had to sit back, you had to not jump in and be like the savior. Like, these guys got to figure a little bit of this out as we go. I'm not going to let them fall off the deep end, but if they fall in the shallow end, they can get out on their own, right?
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you got to let them get close to the fire. It's like literally how I learned how to do what I'm doing is I jumped in, man, right next to the fire, right in the flames. And like, you can only teach. Experience is a great teacher sometimes, as good or better than anything. And really, at the end of the day, my job's almost a experienced facilitator is really what it comes down to. You kind of set parameters around the work experience they're going to have, but I don't. I can help guide the experience, but it's still got to be theirs.
Yeah.
If that,
And I remember back a while ago, you were running. I think you were hanging up some fence somewhere, and you had a new guy in the crew, and he was struggling figuring out the layout or getting you ready for the welder or something to that regard. And you let him kind of fail for like an hour, and then you went over and showed him, hey, this seems hard, cumbersome, not in order. Let's try it this way. And he had 100% buy-in, and then the rest of the day he caught up and was ahead of schedule.
yeah.
And to me, it's that taking that half a break to go, I'm going to let him struggle for 20 minutes or an hour to see how it doesn't work.
Right.
So when I show him how it does work, he doesn't start questioning, well, what if we did it this way? Because he's already tried that and saw firsthand that's not the way to do it.
Right. Well, and when they're, you're kind of hitting their head off the wall, they're pretty open to suggestion to stop hitting their head off the wall,
Yeah.
Typically, yeah. And it depends. Everybody's different. That's the unique thing. You and I've talked a lot about psychology. And I'm not a psychologist, don't get me wrong, but it's just, I like the challenge of how different everybody is, because certain situations you handle it different with certain people. So learning how to read people is a big thing. And everybody takes those moments differently. Some people, they're right heat of it. They're mad, pissed off, and it's not going well. You go over there with a suggestion, they're just, and other people are literally, they need help, and it just depends on the person. And so that just depends how you're going to approach that person.
Yeah. I could talk psychology, and I'm not a psychologist either, and I didn't go to school for it, but the basic top line of it, I'm enamored by it, because it doesn't matter what industry you're in or what you do. People are people. And we all have the same motives. And once you understand the motives and how to communicate, and you can kind of group people into certain, so they say there's 4 types of personalities. And based on the personality type, how you speak to them, your message can resonate the way you want it to. But you have to change your approach to that type of person. So you've got the alpha person who it needs to be their idea. So instead of telling them what to do, you have to ask them questions until they come up with the idea, and then they're 100% bought in on it. You get the people that they're afraid to make decisions, and they want you to do it. And they're willing to be like your trooper and go do that work. Then you get the guy that needs to think through it for a little bit. So like, hey, I need to tell him a couple hours in advance, so when I'm ready to do this, he's had enough time to process, move forward. And when you can start bucketing people as to type of personality types they are, like, that's when you can really click and start getting a team to really rev, because you know how to approach John versus Jake versus William, because you're going to talk to them differently.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I was looking. Remember the Titans, the movie. The Remember the Titans. That kid hated it when Denzel Washington yelled and screamed at him, and then when the defensive coach took him and he who won and explained the team, he became like a eight player on the team. So again, it's like understanding those personalities and types, and then all of our decisions boil down to three things, man: health, wealth, and relationships. And if you can determine why somebody's doing something to one of those three, then you can really get them to buy in.
Right. 100%.
So yeah, I could chat all day about the psychology of people just because once you understand it, it's great. And I think we rush to fill our own needs and we don't take enough time to stop and ask them what they want, not just in work, but in life.
Right. Right. And I think it's important, really, at the end of the day, I think it's important for a business owner or leader to understand the basic needs of why everybody's there. I think a lot of my experience prior to being quote unquote self-employed wasn't always great, man. I've had some good jobs and some great leaders, don't get me wrong, but I've been some places and helped some guys here and there. It's like, man, like literally you think that I wake up in the morning for you.
Right.
You think the whole purpose of me breathing and being on this earth is to serve you. And like this, I'm here because I need some money to pay my bills, man. Not, you know what I mean? Like it's serving you as a byproduct of that. It's not the goal or the intent. And I think people, they have too much of a power trip on because they're the one writing the check, right? Like, oh, well, I write the checks. It's like, yeah, you do. But like they're not here because you're a king. They're here because they need to make a living.
Yeah.
And your job to facilitate that and make that as enjoyable as possible.
Yeah. So with my team, we start every Monday morning meeting talking about the weekend. What did you do? How's the family? What are the kids up to? Did you guys go to church? Like we spend the first 10 to 15 minutes just talking about our weekend.
Yeah.
Because we need to be able to connect on a personal level in order to work together on a professional level, in my opinion.
Right. I agree with you. And that was something. So when I was a young kid, my dad was a store manager at the local Walmart here. And this was before they were 24-hour stores. They would open at like 7, I think. And so I'd go with him at like 5 and I'd walk the store with him and whatever. And then my grandpa would come get me and take me with him all day. But I'd walk the store with my dad and I'll never forget, we're walking down the store and you see this person, they're stocking shelves or whatever. And he'd stop and just talk with them. And just like, oh, I can't remember the lady's name for the life of me, but I remember a specific lady. He literally went to find her to see how her son's soccer game went. And I was like 6 or 7. I'm like, not really understanding. I'm like, this is the big boss. Why does he care? You know what I'm saying? But like, he literally like went out of his way to find this lady, asking like, hey, I'm going to call her Sonia. I don't know her real name. Ask, hey, where's Sonia at? And he went and found her because he wanted to know how soccer game went. And it's not like her son was playing professional soccer. Her son was playing 7th grade soccer. You know what I mean? But I just, that hit me, at a young age. I was like, wow, but that was his style. He was big on, you take care of your people and your numbers take care of themselves. And if they know how to do their job, there's really no room for error at that point.
Yeah, I love that. When you first told me that story about your dad and like that whole, you take care of your people and the numbers take care of themselves. And like taking care of your people, wanting to know about their personal life or things that are important in their lives, one part of it. But, the other part is making sure that they're trained and have the tools they need to do that job and then trusting that they'll do it.
Yeah. And so this kind of reiterates on something you helped me with specifically. So asking questions is something that I do a lot more of. And they're not all rhetorical, it's just literally asking questions and following up on like, hey, I break some guys off to a task and they kind of get heading that way and I'll kind of intersect like, hey, are you comfortable with this? Do you have any questions? Do you understand what you know what I'm saying? And just making sure that they're, because sometimes too, not everybody's going to speak up in a meeting. So I've kind of found sometimes when I'm sending somebody off into maybe a gray area ish or something new, yes, by anybody questions, comments, concerns, usually nobody says anything. Sometimes something smart ass or whatever. But truly, maybe in the group setting, they're not comfortable. So I'll kind of go catch up with them away from everybody and be like, hey, are you truly comfortable?
Yeah.
And that's been a big thing. But again, just, I got to follow up and understand that they are trained. Right.
Yep.
And, you can't expect them to do a job perfectly if they don't know how to do it. Everybody up to fail.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about like when someone does fail or when you're getting ready to do a project, like instead of telling them what to do, we talked about asking them how they would do it.
Yep.
Because we want their mind to think. We want them to think more than just being like, well, this is how Tyler said to do it. Right? We want him to walk through like, well, if I'm going to lay the fence out and do this, I need to start here, step A to step Z.
Yep.
And then you can kind of hear their thought process, understand how they work. And then you go, you know what? I understand why you thought that way. But from time and experience this way, moving step C to step B or vice versa, we can improve our efficiency and be a little faster. But I love that you were thinking ahead this way. And then I feel like you get a lot more buy-in because they feel respected, like their voice is being heard.
Right. So that ties directly into some of our morning meetings, quote unquote, that I don't run anymore. My leads we'll make a plan of like, hey, make me I call it a job plan. Some people would call it an action plan. They're like, all right, cool. This is what needs to be. This is what we're building. We're building this stretch of bunk line right here. Make me a job plan. Make me a sequence plan. I want step A, B, C, and D.
Yep.
Write it down. I don't type it up or anything. I'm like, get your notebook out and write this down. Make it theirs. Draw you some pictures. Let's do a few things and prioritize those things. And then, we'll go through them together. Like, okay, why is it step A, B, and C, and D, and so on and so forth. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, cool. You're correct. Other than in this moment, do you remember that the concrete has to extend out just a little bit for this purpose? So maybe we need to switch C and F, but it's exactly what you're saying. And we utilize that a lot.
Yeah. And since you started using the notebook and actually writing out the list, not just verbalizing it, and drawing some pictures, like how's your communication with the team? Or like, are they asking as many questions to the team leads now as they did a year ago? Or
no, and I think that's two part. I think one is they are just more experienced and understand things better. And so it turned into a snowball effect, right? So a lot of these things that up front, they kind of seem mundane or kind of like, oh man, this is kind of monotonous or don't really see the point in this, but you got to stick through that process, right? You were talking about earlier about staying to it, even when it's a little bit tough, because then all of a sudden that stuff starts becoming automatic to where some of that stuff doesn't have to be communicated because it turns into common knowledge. And, but it still goes back to that structure of, you got to have that structure, that foundation in place and somewhere to go to get to neutral, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I always say two things. One, a good business will never be great if they don't focus on the little details. It's like, that's what literally makes the difference. Right. And it's the discipline to continue to do it. Like, we don't go to the gym one day and then get mad we didn't lose 30 pounds. Like, we know it's a process. It's going to take 90 days or a year or whatever that is. It's no different when you start incorporating these little tiny things into your business. Like, you just got to stick to daily, weekly, or monthly, whatever your process is. And whether you want to do it or not, you got to grind through it.
Right. 100%. So yeah, we have fewer lacks of communications, fewer oversights. I think we're more thorough, man. And it just comes down to people understanding more what's going on. It's not all just right here in my head.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So communication was
another big thing.
Yeah. Communication was a huge thing that I think kind of propelled your team this last year. And
Absolutely.
There's programs out there and apps out there, Facebook Messenger, Slack, all that stuff, and you can kind of create groups and this. But you were just like, well, that's too complex for us. I'm just going to do a group text with my whole team. And like, walk me through that. Like they're using that to joke with each other, plan out the next day, get rides, confirm.
Yep.
Was that group text? Like what have you noticed by them communicating in that?
Um, there, people are on time more often. um, the biggest thing for us, and this is kind of the biggest thing for us, is that it has eliminated the, oh, I didn't know the plan excuse, quote unquote, because it's pretty hard to not know the plan when one of the foreman or a lead or somebody is sending out a group text and everybody's required to respond to it within a reasonable amount of time and they're getting a phone call.
Yeah.
And so it just comes down to, it's really eliminated that probably by 90%. You still get that every once in a while. But it just, just helps keep everybody on the same page, especially when you have multiple jobs going on, multiple moving parts. We have our quote unquote crews, but I don't have anything necessarily set in stone like, hey, Coy, this is your 4 guys no matter what. It's
right.
Cool. These are the guys you're working with for the next couple of days. But next week they might be with Jay. They might be with Angel. You know what I'm saying? And I actually kind of like the plug and play guys and mix and match guys. Some companies are really strict on, you only work with these crews only. And I think that I personally, I see issues with that. Just case in point, if somebody leaves, like you said earlier, or somebody's sick or whatever, I want guys that, I call up a job lead, like, hey, Jay, one of Coy's guys didn't show up. He needs somebody kind of stout today. Could you spare somebody? Like, oh yeah, I'll get him on his way. And vice versa. And it's not like, oh, well, he's a concrete guy. He doesn't really know how to build fence. It's like, no, he's a construction guy. We do it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think cross training against multiple, job types is key, especially in growth phase of a business.
Mm-hmm.
You've got these 100-year-old construction companies. They've got 300, 400 employees. They can have a dedicated concrete guy. They can have a dedicated excavator driver. But when you're running a crew of 10 and 2-3 jobs, boy, you're going to be able to do it all.
Well, and that's our niche, honestly, is jacks of all trades. I mean, come down, actually sitting here at this is my feedlot that I rent. Getting ready to go check on some cattle when we get done. And, but like when we show up, when a feedlot or a dairy hires a company, they don't want to deal with, well, I got to find a fence guy and I got to find a concrete guy and I got to find somebody with a mini excavator. Like they just want to have me come figure out their projects for them. Whether that means I got to sub some stuff in or not, I don't know. Electrical, I've got some subs.
Yeah.
It's just turned into like the sub deal so unreliable anymore that quite literally I started pouring concrete because the concrete guys that I used to use were hit and miss, and keeping schedules so that I could cash flow was impossible. So now we just do it.
Yeah. Just to go back to that, did you kind of have a vision or a plan to be a solution provider for your customers? Be like, hey, if you hire me, we'll take care of all of it. And like, did you have like a specific type of offer that way? Or did it just kind of organically grow into, I'll handle it. I'll handle it.
I think that's a 2-part answer. The culture that I grew up in, how I was raised, is very solution driven. That's just how my dad was. He was a solution guy. If you found a problem, you couldn't really verbalize it unless you had two answers to that problem. Like, hey, Dad, the water trough's running over. He's like, well, what are you going to do about it then? What's telling me about it going to do? And so I was raised to be a solution finder. And, in other jobs that I had, I worked in retail for a while, and quite literally it's service, right? And it's finding solutions, feed solutions, so on and so forth. We dealt in feed is what we did specifically. But then I kind of stumbled into, so I had that skill, if that makes sense, but I never really planned on using it this way. And I kind of did happen organically, just for the simple fact, I was a quote unquote sub to a general contractor. I was doing a steel framing for dairy shades and barns and fence work welding. And he had some inner issues within his company. And I really don't know what he's doing now, but a lot of the projects that I would go on and help them on, they're just my customers directly now. They'd come like, hey, yeah, we need to build these pens. I'm like, oh, well, is so-and-so going to do the concrete and the dirt work? But like, yeah, no, he's out completely. We were just hoping you could take care of it all.
Yeah. And you've used that to your advantage. I mean, some of the smaller customers that you work with, I think you've actually done the design of the whole project up front. So like you could literally go into like a dairy or a feed processing center, all that, and you could say, hey, if you don't want to handle multiple contractors or engineers and this and that, we can walk the property and I can be your guy from A to Z. And you've kind of used this as an offer now, haven't you? Like we're able to have full control over the entire project. Deadlines can be communicated between 3 companies.
Right. Yeah. It all has to flow through me. And then that sounds condescending or like a power trip. And that's not that's not what it's meant for. Just it's got to flow through me so that we can do this efficiently. I get paid by the foot, by the square foot. I don't like hang ups as much as the next guy. I don't want to hang you up no more than I want to get hung up. So like, let's communicate through these things so we can get this stuff done, get paid and go home.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's not that hard. It's literally going back to the whole base of this conversation is communication, right? So being able to communicate with other contractors, or if we go to a feedlot and they've got their own in-house guys that are kind of helping out, helping facilitate things with equipment or whatever. We got to communicate with these guys. We got to be on the same page. They got to know what I'm doing tomorrow, the next day, next week, and vice versa. And it's and we've talked about it too. It's kind of an opportunity for some upsells too. As far as we do a lot of water line stuff. That being said, I'm probably not going to just come to somebody's house and dig them a trench and put water lines in and spigot in. That's not really my scope of work. But if we're at, you want to put in a horse barn and we need utilities, yeah, we'll just do the utilities as well.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And then they'll be mapped out properly. We know exactly where they're at. We'll have a diagram of it. So then in 10 years, like, man, I don't know quite where that water line is. Like, oh shit, I have a diagram. Oh, it's right here.
Yeah.
I write that
upsell. I think upsells are really, for the most part, pretty simple if you are astute enough to look around the project you're currently working on and find 1, 2, 3 other things that the customer could benefit from. Because you've already got the relationship with them. You've already got that little bit of a trust built with them. And
right.
Maybe they say no today, but they might pick it up later. But there's a lot of times these customers will say, oh, we do a lot of work with like guys that do gravel driveway grading and they're small 1-2 man operations. They have their skid steers and all that. And I'm like, how many houses do you look around and see if the downspouts are trenched in away from the house and if all the tree limbs around the house are trimmed and removed? They're, well, I never looked at stuff. And I'm like, that could be an easy $5,000, $2,000 add-on.
Easy.
And you're already there. All you gotta do is talk to the customer. I mean, and it's simple. And it's like changing that brain to like not be so focused on what you are doing, but what the customer needs.
Right. And that goes back to what you were saying just a minute ago, being solution driven. You're literally looking around their place. And that's, a big part of what we do is like, hey, we got to look around this place. If we're on a dairy and like, for instance, we were pouring some concrete on a dairy this summer and some of the stem walls on their bunk lines were falling down. And I didn't even do this. This was Jade, one of my concrete foremen. He pulled the customer aside. It's like, hey, while we're here, you want us to fix these types of things. Like, that's not going to last another season. We could do it. It's no big deal. We've got extra mud coming here in a few days. We can handle that.
Yeah.
Just little things like that. And it's not that they're like, oh, I'm trying to make more money. It's literally trying to keep their place right and keep, because the thing about like dairies and feedlots is it's quite literally a tool to them. This whole facility is how they generate income, and the better it generates income, the more income they have.
Yeah. So you've got a little bit of an unfair advantage over a lot of other contractors because guys that are doing work for homeowners,
right.
Stuff like that. Like it's sometimes cost driven where you can look at something, say, this is going to be an extra $40,000, but you're going to be able to process X amount of cattle more per day. And that $40,000 is going to have an ROI after 120 days. And then your pure profit by adding now instead of trying to figure it out later. So you can always use the numbers to your advantage for upsells too.
100%. And to go back to you talked about your graders, your guys grading driveways and stuff. That's an upsell for us too, because I have one of those. And there's very few places that I take it to that they're not like, hey man, since you're here, can you go fix that road on the backside of the place?
Yeah.
Easy peasy, man. Not a big deal. So that's just having that on my trailer. People seeing that thing's made me money.
Absolutely. I agree with it. I think, for a lot of guys I work with, that's one of the first things I work with them on is upsells and communicating to the customer. I'm a big believer, and we talked a lot about this too. And then I think this will be the last thing. I want to be respectful of your time. We'll talk about this. I've got like 2 simple questions for you, and then we'll kind of wrap it up for you. But estimates. Like, how detailed do you get in your estimates? Like, I tell these guys to get granular and write out everything so that you pack it with value.
Yep.
So the number at the bottom is smaller than it actually is.
Yeah. It depends. Sometimes, and this is kind of learning how to read this goes back to psychology thing, right? Kind of like how to read your customer. Sometimes people are literally just window shopping. And so I just kind of started asking up front, like, do you just want a general number? Like, how serious are you about this? To do this within this quarter? Because if we're not doing within this quarter, I can't spend a ton of time on this, or I'm not going to, so it depends. Sometimes I'll just kind of give rough numbers. I have a general idea what things, I run enough numbers. I can probably tell you off the top of my head what's going to run. And then if you want more detailed than that, then yeah, I like to be as detailed as possible in my estimates. More than anything, clearly defining my scope of work. Because that can get tricky sometimes with change orders. Because the one thing about some of my customer base, sometimes they want to do certain parts of it. So for instance, like we're building a set of milk pens on a dairy right now as we speak. Well, they were supposed to do their own dirt work. Well, we showed up, they hadn't done any of it. They had cleaned nothing. It was not what was communicated up front, which is fine. I'm not mad at them, but because I have the substance within my estimate saying, hey, this amount of dirt work is out of scope of work. You are doing this amount, but now I have basis for my change order.
Right.
It can't fight. Does that make sense? We can't fight over it, because what's there to fight over? You knew the parameters of our deal. We're no longer within those parameters. That is fine. We got your back. We are solution driven. We can handle it, but no, it is not for the same price.
Right.
So I try to be as detailed as possible, mostly stating scope of work and mostly trying to get ahead of any potential issues. A lot of guys have like rock clauses in their excavating or in their fencing and stuff like that. You got to have that kind of stuff, just because really when everyone's given a per foot bid or per square foot bid or per yard bid, all they're doing is adding up. All they're doing is making that presentable in a quantifiable number. But there has to be something that backs up, oh, well, this fence costs $22 a linear foot. Okay, well, why does it cost $22? What components make it $22? Is it because you called somebody and asked what they charge and that's what you charge now? If that's your business model, you're not going to win, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're not going to make it very long. But if you know, okay, well, I know it takes X amount of labor, X amount of days. I want to figure 5% contingency as far as, potential rock issues. We get above 5%, then I'll put it in my closet. It's a change order. 5%, 3% is tolerable, which no harm, no foul. Build a little cushion into it and get on with your life,
Yep.
I think you have to clearly state your scope of work and your parameters. For like me in the concrete deal, if I don't clearly state what size the pad is, and then 2 days before pour day, they're like, oh, we need to make the pad a little bit bigger. Well, it costs an extra. I'm not going to eat the $1,500 in concrete extra because you're like, oh, well, you said you provide me a pad. It's like, yeah, well, I said I'd provide you a pad at this parameter. Outside of this parameter is an upcharge.
Right.
But it just eliminates confusion. And not that customers are confrontational. It goes back to clearly communicating. And when you clearly communicate those things, there's nothing to fight over. There's nothing to be confused about.
Yeah. I find the contractors are probably more confrontational than the customers because they're aggravated. The customer is not on the same page with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but how can they be on the same page about something you didn't communicate? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it all comes back to you. And I'm big on what's that?
No, and this customer doesn't do most customers don't do your line of work.
No, that's why they hired you.
So
If they could do it, they would.
Yeah, if you talk in your tribal language and the way you talk at a job site and you expect him to understand and follow what you're doing, it's a recipe for a disaster.
Yeah.
If you break it down into more layman terms and digestible information for somebody who doesn't do this type of work to understand, then you can actually meet at a common ground and have a good conversation about what needs to be done and what changes, if any, need to be addressed.
Right. I agree 1,000%. And it just goes back to communication, whether it's with your customers, your vendors, your employees. I don't know. The most successful people I know have soft skills. I know some really skilled people that could never be self-employed because they don't have any of the soft skills.
Yeah.
They're as good as anybody at building something, but they could never monetize building that because they could not keep that wheel turning over and over and over again into something sustainable.
Yep.
And having those soft skills is big.
Awesome, man. Well, I had two quick questions to ask you, and we'll let you wrap up with your cattle out there. So if a guy is within his first year or two of business, he's doing okay, he's had some struggles, and he wants to grow to the next phase, what's your best piece of advice?
Go get help. Don't be proud. Whether it's, whether you get online and you find some help like you and I have done, or you go take some classes at your local community college. You've got to know your numbers and you've got to figure out systems and processes. You have to. There's just, and it depends, if you just want to do with one employee out of your truck the rest of your life, don't do anything different, man. Just be really good at your job and ease around. But if you want to build it into something different, you have to have systems, you have to have processes, and you have to truly, probably step one is I actually probably come up with a set of core values as to who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. And then you build everything off of that.
Love it, man. That's great advice. And the guys that are working a 1-man or a 2-man crew, and if that's what they're happy with, that's awesome. It's nobody's job to jump you and say you need to be 30 employees. Like if you're cool with 2 people and that's your goal, you're winning. Like that's success.
Yeah.
But for the guy that wants
and that works for you, you can pay your bills, love what you're doing. Quite literally, the reason why I'm scaling is because I have the opportunity to. It's not that I was just happy as a smaller company, but I'd like to make more money. And I have the opportunities to do different types of projects, and they require being a bigger company. That's just quite frankly what it is. But there's nothing wrong with being a 1 or 2 guy deal at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
You just have to. I think you just have to understand how to run whatever it is you're running. You got to run it as good as you can.
Yeah.
And you got to be always. I don't know. There's an old guy around here calls it keeping the edge sharp. You got to keep your edge sharp, man. You can't get in the mundane stuck in the mud deal.
We always say iron sharpens iron, and that's why I love having conversations with other business owners or some mentors. For me, some spiritual leaders as well, but like all that kind of keeps me sharp, both personally and professionally. And, the old adage, Tyler, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah. Well, I've never been the smartest person in the room, right? Yeah, that's never happened yet. Maybe someday. That's not doing anything.
And then the last thing, man, like, so you've scaled from 4 to 6 employees to like 10, 12, 13 right now. You've got some big goals for 2023. How are you preparing and planning for the new set of obstacles that you're perceiving you're going to have for next year?
Not as complicated as one might think. I'm a huge believer in sometimes keeping things simple. And I'm really just going to build on and refine what we're already doing, because I don't think our next steps are necessarily like earth-shattering large moves. Our next steps are getting better at the small, minute details. And if that makes sense. So I want to give my guys more substance as far as support goes, more training, but more than anything, my back end deficiencies within my company is where I need to grow on the back end so I can sustain what's happening on the front end and keep track of it, not have a bottleneck at the office and paperwork and, code of conducts, HR stuff is, we can kind of have a verbal stuff, but we're going to kind of get a little bit deeper in there just so that there's no gray area on what's expected, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and so on and so forth. So those are kind of my key focuses right now. So that an analogy I have is somebody one day, asked me, how it felt having a crew of guys that I don't have to go manage and they're making money for the company. And I was like, oh man, it feels awesome. It was like, and all you had to do was hire Jade. I said, no, all I had to do was give Jade something to hire too. There's a big difference right there.
Yeah.
And so I'm working on giving the right type of people something to hire on to.
Yeah. And again, you stated it earlier that literally starts with your core values, understanding who you are and knowing why you do what you do.
100%.
Because the people that you hire need to tie on to those core values and those beliefs in order for you to grow successfully.
Yeah. And somebody that I look up to, he was one of my coaches growing up. He's big on, and I didn't really understand it when I was young, but I get it now. But he was really big on live intentionally, do everything intentionally. Don't do anything accidentally. Wake up every day intentionally. And I think as a business owner and as a leader, you have to be intentional in everything that you do.
I agree.
So, and I think being aware of that intent is big. And that's a place on personal basis that I'm pushing myself more intent within the conversations that I have, just more present, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that's a personal benchmark for myself that I'm working on for 2023.
Awesome, man. Well, Tyler, I can't thank you enough for taking some time out of your day, sitting down and having this conversation. I always learn something new when you and I talk. I know it was supposed to be the other way around when we started working together, but it's been a great friendship that we developed over the last year. And I cherish our friendship. I look forward to seeing you continue to grow. We're here for you whenever you need something. And I do have one other thing I'd like to ask you real quick. So I typically want to close the show out with a little push for Skid Steer Nation.
Oh yeah.
I want you to do the push for me. Like, why should somebody go look at Skid Steer Nation for their next skid steer attachment?
Because you're going to buy quality. I started buying auger bits through you, auger drives, and I'm sold on. I don't need to buy them anywhere else.
Awesome, man.
There are very few people in my neck of the woods that punch more holes than I do with my company. Those bits are the way to go. Those Earth combo bits are the way to go. We got it was the Diga, the Series 3 or 4 that you sold me?
Either the 3 or the 4, the DDS or DSS, yeah.
That thing's a beast, man. That thing's a beast. I've never ran one like it. So
I love it.
The quality of your attachments and your willingness to find the right solutions. And, when I ask you attachments about questions, or questions about attachments, you almost nerd out, man, because you're doing the research. You know everything about them. And I don't need to know everything about them. I just need to know it's going to work for my application. And I'm confident if I call you, communicate what I need, you've got it.
So I know just enough to be dangerous. But no, building off your comment about quality, like, we prided ourselves on starting this company by doing the homework on small family-owned manufacturers. We've put them through a rigorous interview process to make sure that their quality, their materials, their customer service, all of that, it meets or exceeds what I believe our customers want in attachments. So, again, if you're looking for quality American-made attachments, Skid Steer Nation, we've done the homework for you. If it's there, it's something that I personally would buy. I wouldn't recommend it. If I wouldn't buy it. So we're there for all your needs. And if we don't have what you're looking for, like you said, I nerd out on some stuff. I'm happy to direct you to a company that makes what I feel is the best product in the market so that you get value.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, T, thanks so much for joining us today, man. Go out there and feed those girls so they don't get hungry and have some money with them.
That's right, man. I appreciate your time. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Take care.
Yep. See ya.